All right, those of you who are familiar with it, it is our Manchester City Keep 'em Dump. I'm Gabriele Marcotti. I'm joined by Mark Ogden. Mark, this is where we get to play director of football, sporting director, whatever you want to call it. We're going to pretend we're Ugo Viana, and we're going to try to figure out, based on City's current situation, based on contracts, player ages, performances, Pep's wishes, what this team should do. Let's start kind of at the top with an overview, which is about where Manchester City are. They're coming off their worst season in many, many years. And there's a lot of unknowns, mostly to do with the charges and with Pep himself. And Ugo Viana coming in.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that's three straight off the bat, isn't it? But the big one is the charges, because I think we both expected this to be addressed weeks ago now, that certainly the first stage of a verdict and then the charges to follow. But we are now in early May, mid-May, and we still don't know. So that's hanging over the club. We don't know what's going on. The club don't know what's going on. So that will obviously impact on their planning for next year. They will have plans in place, but obviously their final plans may be altered by what happens if they lose the case. And then the Pep situation, like you say, Pep signed a contract early this season until 2027, but that doesn't mean he'll stay until 2027.
Yeah, and I think there's the other elephant in the room, which is more broadly, is this whole thing came about before financial fair play and financial sustainability rules. Part of the idea was to showcase Abu Dhabi as in the Emirate, business opportunities, whatever else, attract tourism, attract investment. I mean, they've been doing this a long time. They've been winning on the pitch. At some point, this business with getting all these Emirati companies to sponsor them and so on, at some point that may come to an end as well.
Pep being given a new contract just to quieten down the speculation, because City will hope he stays for 2 more years, but I'm not convinced he will. So they have to work on the basis that he is staying, with the caveat that he might not.
Looking at the squad, immediately what you notice is that there's 3 goalkeepers. One of them, Scott Carson, been around forever, never plays, whatever. We assume his contract is up. We assume he's happy to stay and kind of be like a coach, elder statesman around in the goalkeeping room. We both have him extending that. But the other 2 are interesting because Ederson, 31 years old, his contract expires in a year's time. Stefan Ortega, 32, his contract also expires in a year's time. It's an unusual situation. What do we do here?
Well, so we're Hugo Viana and we're wondering what Pep wants to do with his goalkeepers. Now, from what I've seen this season, I'm going back to last season, Pep isn't convinced by either of his goalkeepers. I think Ederson was a massive part of City's success in the majority of Pep's reign, but over the last 18 months, he has not always been a first choice. Ortega's come in, but I don't think either are particularly top of Pep's list right now. So I think what I would do, I would look to move on Ederson, try and get a fee, bring a goalkeeper in, and then try to persuade Stefan Ortega to stick around for 1 more year, take his chances and maybe challenge another goalkeeper for the number 1 spot. And then if he can't break through, he goes next summer. But I think Ederson is the one that you get a fee for. Ederson was close to leaving last year. I don't think Ederson's particularly happy. It makes sense for Ederson to go, despite the fact he's a big part of Man City's game.
What I'm not sure about why you might keep him for another season, perhaps while still bringing in an heir apparent and shifting Ortega, is I don't know how much money you're realistically going to get for him. This is a guy most people had as sort of top 5 or top 10 in the world, but he's got a year left on his wage on his contract. And like you said, he's 31 years old. So I think if you can get a hefty fee north of 20 million, sure. I don't think you're coming close to that because there's a finite number of clubs. There's a lot of good goalkeepers who are going to be on the market. So we disagree on that one a little bit. Let's move on to the defenders. There's a bunch here. Ruben Diaz, we're both keeping him without extending him. 27 years old. Why would you not extend a 27-year-old, Mark?
Remind me of his contract length, Gab?
2027. He's got 2 years left.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are priorities. I think other than Ruben Diaz right now, he's not had the best of seasons. I think he was, again, a bit like Ederson, integral to City's success in his first couple of years, but he's not had the greatest season. And I think his comments after the 0-0 draw at Southampton last week were strange, and it was almost like a very kind of petulant reaction, and that to me suggests a bit of unhappiness at the way that his opposition was playing, but also a bit of frustration at the club as well, that things aren't going the way they should do. So maybe there's a bit of a sense of his unhappiness at his own play, his own form. a player at the top of his game wouldn't be saying those things. So I don't know. I think Diaz can prove himself again next season before getting a new contract.
Kusanov came over in January for a lot of money. This is another one where we disagree a little bit. You want to keep him at the club to help develop him. I want to loan him out. I've seen enough to see that he's not going to get meaningful minutes on a good City team. He's still young. Let him develop somewhere else.
He's had a very bumpy start, Kusanov, but I do think that, he's in there for the long run now. So you've got to stick with him and try and improve him while he's there.
Nathan Ake, 30 years old, 2027. A bit like Diaz, but 3 years older and not as good. I think you can get a little bit of money back for him. But, peanuts, because he's on a big contract with 2 years left. I don't see any reason to keep him around. You already have Akanji to play the kind of versatile jack-of-all-trades defender here. But you want to keep him.
Yeah, because you have his cover at left-back. He can play left-sided defence, he can play left-back, and I don't think Guardiola is a natural left-back.
Manuel Akanji, 29 years old, 2027. Keep, do not extend. We're both on the same page here. He's versatile. We like him. John Stones, here's where we disagree a little bit. Again, he's 30 years old. He's got a year left. The contract expires 2026. But the guy's always injured. I don't think anybody's going to give you money for him. But he has this situation where he pops up once every 6 weeks or so. He's fit. He's a couple games. He contributes. I wouldn't extend him. But I would just say, John, you can stay as long as you're fit, and then we'll see if you can stay fit. But I wouldn't move him on just now. But you would. You think somebody?
Yeah, I would. I think you'd let Ake go. I'd let Stones go. I think you keep one of those and you let one go. And I think Ake's likely to be involved a lot more than John Stones next season because John Stones can't stay fit. He's a similar profile to Luke Shaw at Man United. He's a very talented player, but the injuries have caught up with him, and I think Pep can't rely on him now. He can rely on Nathan Ake a little bit more, so you can try and find someone to take John Stones.
Vitor Reis also arrived in January. He's 19 years old. He played 1 minute Premier League football. He's a long-term contract. We're both sending him out on loan so he can develop. Josko Gvardiol, 23 years old, has got a deal through 2028. We're keeping him. We're not extending him because I think we both agree that extra year gives you some time to decide if you want to extend him. And on what terms, but obviously he's a big part of this team. Rico Lewis, here we disagree again. 20 years old, 2028. I'm keeping him for now without extending him. You're moving him on.
Yeah, well, bearing in mind I live in Manchester, Gab, and I'm surrounded by lots of Manchester City and Manchester United fans. The City fans I speak to tell me endlessly Rico Lewis isn't good enough for this Man City team. And I have to say that he did stand out when he came into the team a couple of years ago, but that was in a very, very good team. And young players, when they come through, if they're playing a team that's full of talented players, it's easy to adapt. When it's been harder for City this season, Rico Lewis has struggled. So I don't think he's the answer at right back. He's not the answer at centre midfield. So he's really a square peg in a round hole.
Nico Riley, also 20 years old, 2028. Pretty open and shut. We're keeping him and we're extending him also because he's still on his kind of young player contract. He's really making peanuts.
Yeah, different level. This is in contrast to Rico Lewis. I think Nico and Rico. This is very confusing, Gav. I think Nico O'Reilly is a player that will have a big future at City. And I think Pep loves his physique, his profile. Pep might be evolving again. He's got athleticism. He's got height. He can get down the left flank. He can play midfield. I think Nico O'Reilly is a definite keep and definite extend. And he'll have a big future at City.
Wow, big fan there. Mateus Nunes, 26 years old, 2028. He's an obvious keep. Kyle Walker, 34 years old, 2026. He's been on loan at Milan. He joined them in January. Hasn't really pulled up trees at Milan. Hasn't been bad either, or had ups and downs, I guess. Milan, I'm pretty sure, are not going to pick up his option. He's got to go somewhere. You can't loan him out because he's got a year left on his contract, unless you want to extend it, but surely you don't want to do that. I guess it's a situation where you pay him to leave if you don't want to keep him.
Either that or loan him. I know you say you can't loan him out, but you can loan him out. You can just loan him to the end of his contract, but he's clearly got no future.
Pay him to leave, right?
Yeah, but it depends on the club that wants to take him. The club that wants to take him might find it easy to take him on loan rather than be committed to having Kyle Walker on a contract. So, but either way, Kyle Walker won't be at Man City next season.
All right. Jan Koto, we should mention because obviously he was at Girona a year ago. He was on loan at Borussia Dortmund last year. this is a good example. He was a really highly rated sort of attacking fullback. He's actually been pretty poor for Borussia Dortmund this season, but they exercised their option to buy in November. That's a permanent move for 24 million euros, round about 20 million pounds. Really, really good business for Manchester City. And given it's City, I wouldn't be surprised if they wangled some sort of buyback clause in there. Rodri, here I sense a disagreement.
Yeah.
He's 28 years old. He's got 2 years left on his contract. Obviously, he's missed the whole season, although he may come and play a few minutes at the end of the campaign. I think you keep him. I don't see how you even think about extending his deal until he proves his fitness. You don't need to wait until he's got a year left. And look, a year from now, he's going to be 29 years old. I don't think his transfer value is going to be enormous at that point. You can have this conversation in January, but there's no reason to go and talk new contract now.
Yeah, well, I disagree on that because I think it's all, financially, you're right. The sensible decision is to wait and see how he goes. But I think he's one of City's biggest players. They've massively missed him this season. He's a Ballon d'Or winner. I think City have to, show some faith in Rodri in his recovery and say, look, we really miss you this season. We want you to stay. Here's a new contract, a contract extension. Because if they don't, he might think, well, okay, then you've had the chance. Next year, I've got a year left on my contract. Real Madrid keep being linked with him. He would not be averse to move back to Spain. So I think it's on City now to end this speculation before it starts by tying down to a new contract and saying, look, we really missed you. We back you to recover properly. Here's a new contract.
Nico Gonzalez, 23 years old, 2029. I think he was supposed to be the Rodri kind of replacement or plug the hole in January. I don't think that's really worked out. They overpaid for him. They're stuck for him. They're stuck with him. Unless Pep decides he really doesn't like him and he's never going to play him, in which case you loan him, you have to keep him, right? Mateo Kovacic, 31 years old, 2027. We both have him as a keep, do not extend. This is primarily for his age, right, Mark?
Yeah, he's a steady player, Kovacic. He's not spectacular. I don't think he adds a lot when he plays. I don't think they miss a lot when he doesn't play, but he's an experienced body in midfield, and I think you keep him around. There's other issues to address than Mateo Kovacic this summer.
Ilkay Gundogan, he's 34 years old now. His contract was due to expire at the end of the season, but he made enough appearances where he triggered a clause. It's automatically extended for a year. I'll tell you right now where I stand. I would go to him and I'd be like, okay, you're not going to play any part in my plans this year. If you want to hang out here because you enjoy Manchester and you're a good influence in the dressing room and you might only play occasionally, that's fine. Equally, if you want to go somewhere else, we're open to it. We won't hold you back.
No, I agree with that 100%. With the caveat that they shouldn't have brought him back last summer. I think, he has served a purpose in the sense that Rodri's been out and he's played a lot of games, but had Rodri not been injured, then Gundogan would have just been playing a bit part role, which is what he's there for now.
Bernardo Silva, 30 years old. He's only has a year left. We both have him as a keep and do not extend, and there's a reason for it, Mark.
Yeah, well, listen, he seems to have spent the whole of his time at Man City trying to leave in every single summer, but staying. But I think now that if there's a light at the end of that tunnel, it's next year when he could leave on a free transfer. So I think he's just going to stick around for a year and take his chances as a free agent.
Kevin De Bruyne, 33 years old, contract expires 2025. He's been released. In terms of numbers and financials, he's going to turn 34, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. I think it's funny how everybody was saying he was finished, he couldn't play, blah, blah, blah. And then he ended up playing nearly all the time at the tail end of the season, just as he was getting towards the end of his contract.
Yeah, but, Kevin De Bruyne has been a great player for Man City. Some City fans say he's been the best ever player, and he may well be, but everything comes to an end, and I think you're saying that he's had a good run. He has had a good run recently, but he's been playing in games that haven't had the intensity that Man City usually have at this stage of the season. So his goals have come against weak opposition. He's missed over 40 games since the start of last season with injury. It's come to the end of the line, and I think City on this one are right to be ruthless in the eyes of their fans, but that's why they've been successful over the years. They've made the right calls at the right time.
James McAtee, 22 years old. He has a year left. I find this one interesting, Mark.
Yeah, City would like him to stay, but McAtee's grown a little bit frustrated at his lack of opportunities. He's played in the FA Cup, he's played in the Carabao Cup, but he's not a guy that starts the biggest games. And, Pep likes McAtee. There is a suggestion he sees a lot of Bernardo Silva in him, but there's interest in McAtee from Germany, Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Dortmund, good clubs that he would basically play virtually every week and be playing Champions League. So City might find it hard to keep him. Now, obviously, he's under contract, so they don't have to let him go. But I think if they get a good offer, and they probably will do this summer, the business decision maybe to keep him. But he's obviously a good player to have around. But if I'm Marcotti, I'm leaving.
He's got a year left. Extending him just to preserve his transfer value to me makes no sense, because ideally he won't be playing, because City will have better players next year. The only way you extend his deal is if you think he can contribute. And I don't see how he can if City are going to be where they want to be. So, hey, look, if this Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Dortmund talk is all real, by all means, go knock yourself out there. Plus, knowing City, they'll probably put a buyback clause in there anyway to protect themselves. Calvin Phillips, 28 years old. He still has 3 years on his contract, which is remarkable. He was on loan at Ipswich this season. He wasn't good at Ipswich. He was on the bench a lot. He was an unused sub a whole bunch of time. We all agree on this. You loan him out and hope that somebody takes him, and you'll have to subsidize his wages. And you even suggested that he was one of the club's worst ever signings.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've given City a lot of justified praise over the years for their transfer dealings. You know, they've done very, very well, but Calvin Phillips has been a disaster. If he goes back to Leeds next season, I wouldn't be surprised.
Forward, Jeremy Doku, 22 years old, 2028. He's a straight keep. No need to extend him. Jack Grealish, 29 years old, 2027. Again, we agree, keep, but please do not extend his contract.
Look, from a City perspective, I think they need to loan him out, because he's not playing enough. And from a player perspective, he has to leave. He has to get out, whether it's on loan or, I mean, permanent transfer looks impossible considering the fee and the wages. But, you know, Jack Grealish is he's kind of withering on the vine under Pep Guardiola. He's not a player that seems to be enjoying himself. He's a player that had, you know, real natural ability to take players on, and it's been crushed out of him by Pep. He's become a robot in Pep's kind of very formulaic, structured team. And I think it would suit Grealish to get away. And if City could get anything for him, they would do. But I just don't see how financially anyone could do this deal.
Phil Foden, 24 years old, 2027. Another disagreement. One of us is keep and extend. The other one is move on.
Well, yeah. So I'm Hugo Viana, and I'm Ferran Soriano, and I'm even Khaldoon Al-Mubarak here. You're looking at a situation where Phil Foden is, you know, almost Man City's poster boy, in the sense that he's the player that came through the ranks. He's done everything. He's won everything. He's a local lad from Stockport that has won everything. But I think he could become Man City's Trent Alexander-Arnold, because he's got 2 years on his contract. I won't say he's had a terrible season, but he's had a very difficult season under Pep. Pep doesn't seem to have the same faith in him that he had a year ago. So if you're Phil Foden, you've won everything at Man City, you've done everything at Man City, but your coach isn't playing as often as you should do, why are you going to sign a new contract? Why even think about signing a contract? I've been thinking about seeing the contract out and leaving, or even trying to get away now, because Phil Foden needs a challenge or a change. He'd be great in La Liga. I don't see he could play for anybody, but I think he's maybe come to the end of the road at Man City. And I think if he could get a move, take it. If not, don't sign a new contract. Be the new Trent and see how the Man City fans treat him if he signs for Real Madrid on a free contract.
You have to defer to Pep. Certainly, if I were Foden, I'd go to him and say, hey, what is your plan for me? I do not want to be, am I really going to be a jack of all trades where I play on the wing once and I play through the middle once? Are you going to sign somebody else? What's the system? Am I a part of it? All right, Savinho, 21 years old, 2029. He hasn't pulled up trees, but he's definitely definitely somebody who can contribute. Oscar Bob also had a terrible injury, comes back. He's also 2029. Obviously, you keep him. Erling Haaland, 24. He's got a deal through 2034. We both believe there's the release clause that will become active in 2 years, which is when Pep's contract expires. But obviously, he's a keep. And Omar Marmoush, who they just signed, 26 years old, 2029. He's also somebody you keep. So moving on to our assessment here. I looked at, tell me if you disagree, right? I look at all these players and I ask myself, okay, who is 100% certain to be first choice all year long of the players they have now? And I'd come up with Guardiola, Ruben Dias, Rodri, and Erling Haaland, and nobody else. That's unusual. Right. That's kind of like a blank canvas. Have I forgotten somebody?
No, I think, back in the day when City were the team, you probably look at 7 or 8. And I think you can say that about Liverpool. Now, the best teams have 7 or 8 essentials and the rest work around it. So that and even Dias is, I think you're right, but he's clinging onto that status.
They're in a really good position as far as PSR and financial stability rules are concerned. Again, pending the outcome of all their legal proceedings. I think they have to go for value and for talent if opportunity and seize opportunities if they arise. With the goalkeeper, we both agree that they're going to need to bring in a goalkeeper. We disagree over whether you shift Ederson or Ortega. At the back, we both agree we want somebody to compete with Mateus Nunes for the right back job. Could be Rico Lewis, maybe.
No.
Otherwise, if you find the right player, you maybe bring him in. At the left back position, we got O'Reilly. Would you bring in a left back to compete with O'Reilly, or are you okay with the Guardiola, Kanji, Ake group?
No, I'm not a fan of Guardiola left back, and I think Ake is just your kind of stopgap. I'd try and find a top left back. I know there aren't many around, but I would try and find a top left back.
Wait, you just told Nico O'Reilly how much you liked him, how he's going to be a big part of this team's future, and now you want to bring in another left back. He's like, thanks, Mark.
I think he can play further forward. I wouldn't want to restrict him to playing at left back.
I think to some degree he has to make it work with these. Maybe he can sign one midfielder, but otherwise, unless he can move people, there's just a lot of guys there with big contracts. That's even if they manage to move Gundogan, which is by no means guaranteed. The wingers are solid and generally young. We're okay there, even if we put Grealish in the mix because he's not going anywhere. But we both like Doku, Bob. If Foden sticks around, he's an option there. Bernardo Silva can play wide. And of course you have Savinho. So and Marmoush too. So I think we're covered there, right?
I think Grealish will go. I think there'll be a loan. You mentioned all those names. There's 4 or 5 players ahead of him. I think Grealish at some point this summer they'll move Grealish out because for his career. Look, there's a World Cup next summer. He missed the Euros last year. It really hurts him. We know that. He'll be desperate to play at the World Cup next year. He's not going to do that by staying at Man City. So by the end of the window, Jack Grealish won't be at Man City.
All right, they're obviously fine with Erling Haaland. I think we both agree though that maybe having a backup who is similar in style, and obviously nowhere near as good as Haaland.
Yeah.
So that when Haaland's not there, you don't have to change everything around unless you want to. Going through this, we do not have that many kind of new signings based on need. So I think if they do want to get back quickly, given the way a lot of squad is older, I think we're in agreement. They have to think in terms of opportunities, best player available. Certainly have a run at Florian Wirtz if he wants to come. I don't know. I mean, that's obviously going to be expensive. You mentioned Tijani Reinders. Undoubtedly, there are others. But I think we're at the stage, going back to what we said about we only have maybe 4 nailed-on starters. If a star becomes available, who you think can elevate this team, I think you have to be in the market for him, and then you work out later, unless he plays Rodri's position or Haaland's position. We agree on that, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's like City have got the headroom to do it, but there's a very big dark cloud hanging over the club in terms of what happens next. If you're a top star that might go to Man City, you're thinking, well, I don't want to go just yet until I know what's going to happen with these pesky charges. So that might affect their ability to bring people in.
Maybe you get that 2027 release clause that some people believe exists.
I don't think the biggest stars ever want to be playing for Man City against, I don't know, Wrexham in the Championship anytime soon.
Stop it. Now you're trolling, Mark. Mark, thank you so much for joining me for Manchester City. Keep it up.